You've looked at the character select screen and figured out very quickly Karin is the only way to go. I'll be happy to tell you that you've made the right choice. Obviously you're not 100% sure of that yet, otherwise you wouldn't be watching this, I know. But trust me, you've made the right choice. Today we're going through the following points. Pressing Karin's buttons, specials, her V-trigger, Kanzuki Ryuguren no kata, can openers, bread and butter combos, and we will also briefly touch upon her mix-ups. Before we start, I want you to keep one thing in mind. I'm not an expert, I'm not a pro player, and I'm certainly not an online warrior that gives a damn about his points. I've been playing Karin for exactly 2 weeks at the point of him putting this together, so take it for what it is. Karin is a pressure tool and she's decked out, but it's important to know what each button actually does for you as a player. Let's go through each of her buttons one by one. Let's start with her buttons in a standing position. Her standing LP has decent reach and can link into other light attacks. Her standing MP stuffs a lot of moves and allows her to easily hit confirm specials. Standing HP reaches deceptively far, has high priority over other moves, and is Karin's best anti-air. It can be somewhat slow when dealing with rounded opponents though. Her standing LK is a good interruption tool and one of her best buttons by far. We'll further dissect this button during one of the later topics in this video though. Standing MK is going to be your most often pressed button. It reaches far, stuffs a lot of normals, and when spaced correctly, even acts as another anti-air, although rather poorly. So stick to standing HP when you're dealing with jump-ins. If you hold towards your opponent and pressing MK, you will get Karin's overhead, Sumojigari. The overhead serves its purpose in hitting crouching opponents, but if your spacing is anything but the absolute max distance this move will allow for, expect to be counted hard. Also, even though it might look like she's airborne, she's not. She can easily get grabbed out of it. To avoid rising sodium levels in your own body, never ever use this move when you're right in front of your opponent, and always hold away from your opponent when you want to execute a standing MK. I can't stress this last point enough. Burn this into your muscle memory. Always hold back when you want to execute a standing MK. Lastly, we have a standing HK, which I personally use mainly for far reach punishes and as a hit confirm for V-trigger activation. Next up we have crouching moves. Her crouching LP, same as with her standing LP, allow you to link another one into it. This button also has another property, which we'll discuss together with standing LK during the aforementioned later segment. Karin's crouching MP is her quintessential combo starter. It links into both her standing MP and her crouching MK. This branching in which link to go for is actually very important and will be further dissected during the B&B combo segment. Crouching HP is pretty awesome and very deceiving. At first glance it looks like that this is supposed to be her anti-air, but it isn't. While it's possible, it's very tricky to punish jump-ins with this attack as it leaps forward by quite a bit, usually resulting in completely missing what you were trying to hit and subsequently having to pay a lot of health for it. Instead, you're better off using it after a blocked standing LK to try and fish out throw attempts. Karin's crouching LK is fast, but you're mainly going to use it for interrupts when you're finding yourself in a situation where you're getting looped by characters like Dictator and Nash for example, and you don't have any V-meter stocked up. It also cancels into some specials like Tenku and Mujinkyaku. Her crouching MK is pretty much what you'd expect. It has decent reach and cancels into specials. It's one of her best attacks, but it gets stuffed easily. During footsies, you absolutely want to throw in standing LKs to stuff your opponent's attacks. Karin's crouching HK is a very tempting button. It reaches far, has a high probability of a hard knockdown due to the crush counter mechanic in Street Fighter V, and does relatively high damage for a standalone attack. Like most crouching HKs though, its recovery is abysmal. This move will get you killed more often than not if you abuse it. Unless you're expecting to punish a specific move, only use it to punish blocked max distance crouching HKs your opponent threw your way. With Karin, you don't really want to be airborne outside of trying to land a cross-up, fake a cross-up, or neutral jumps to punish throw attempts. For example, jump HK is a good punish for throw attempts, and with forward jumps you'd probably want to use her MK, which is also her go-to cross-up. While I'm sure the other buttons do serve a purpose somehow in character-specific matchups, I couldn't find any great universal use for them. For all intents and purposes though, Karin is a grounded character, so you really don't want to spend any more time in the air than you absolutely have to. Like every other character, Karin has 2 throws, both of which are okay, but nothing to write home about. Karin's V-skill, Meoken, is good for frame traps, building V-meter on block and hit, and for hit confirm activation of her V-trigger. The recovery on just quickly tapping MP and MK together is pretty bad. Instead, you want to hold down the 2 buttons. There will be a small wind-up time for the move to come out, but you'll be safe on block at least. It's not a move you really want to keep on spamming, but you also don't want to ignore it, as it does build your V meter without being offensive. Worth noting is that the move can destroy projectiles, and when going through a projectile, will even be granted increased reach. It's really hard to time this though, so this property will be more used for reads rather than reactions. With that, we've gone through Karin's normals. Feeling tired yet? I hope not, there's still quite a bit to go through here. Karin is a physical character. She doesn't have any projectiles whatsoever, so unless you're in close proximity to your opponent, you don't pose much of a threat to them. Other than walking, forward dashing and jumping, Karin has two specials that allow her to close the distance though. The first one is Kanzuki Ryo Hokujutsu Seppo, but fuck that, we're going to call it command dash going forward. The distance you can close with this move is dependent on the kick button you press. LK has the shortest reach, MK goes a bit further, HK goes the furthest, and the X version, while faster, sits between MK and HK in terms of distance traveled. The X version also has the added bonus of going through projectiles. What makes this dash scary is one of its follow-ups, Orochi. Karin's Orochi has a really big hitbox and leaves you safe on block. It also leaves you in a perfect position to squeeze in a standing or crouching MK. The EX version puts your opponent into a crumple state, like focus attacks in Street Fighter 4 did. This allows for mix-ups, which is once again something that we will go through a bit later in this video. The second command dash follow-up is Tenko. You really only want to use this move within combos and never just throw it out there. It's highly unsafe and will get you punished really hard on block. Tenko comes in two distinct flavors, Just Frame and Normal. The Just Frame version does more damage, but other than that, both are just as viable in most situations. Having said that, as the differences for the most part are negligible, you really want to train your hands to go for the Just Frame version, as the added damage as well as the extended time it gives you on follow-up inputs in your combo will make life much easier. The EX version doesn't have a Just Frame input though. In regards to both the EX versions of Orochi and Tenko, you will have to execute an EX command dash for those moves to become the respective EX versions. You don't have to press two punch buttons at all. Just the EX command dash will activate the EX version of whichever follow-up you go for. Please note that Karin's EX Orochi is not safe on block. The second move that is used to close distance is her Senha. Same as with her command dash, the strength of the button you choose determines the distance Karin will travel, LP having the shortest reach while HP going the furthest. You can actually punish projectiles on reaction from almost full screen, as it will leap over the projectile and hit your opponent during the recovery animation. Karin's EX Rasenha is practically an entirely different move. It will go up at a really weird angle and is a decent-ish anti-air. Don't rely on this too heavily though, its hitbox is kinda wonky and will sometimes not hit at all if you're just a pixel off. It's a good reversal in situations where you know it will hit, but never throw this out on a whim as you will pay for it really damn hard. Her normal Rasenhas also have two follow-ups if you so choose. The first one is Senha Kusabi, a slide that would make Rockman proud. If your Rasenha hits, this is the follow-up you want to go with as it's a guaranteed follow-up hit. Even on block you might want to go with it because you're going to get punished either way. Of course you do have the option to go with Senha Reshu instead, but the chances of that hitting are very slim. You see, Kusabi is a low, so once the opponent knows that, they will be blocking low. Reshu only hits standing opponents though. This means that if your opponent is crouching after blocking Rasenha, both follow-ups will be avoided at the same time. Depending on your spacing, there's a chance that your Reshu will go over the opponent, but it's very slow, so you're probably going to get punished pretty bad anyway. Rasenha can be good when you're doing mix-ups, but unless it's a reaction punish, you're gambling with your health bar. It really is a move you never want to spam or rely on, as careless abuse will open yourself up to more pain than your opponents could ever achieve by themselves. Dependent on the kick button you press when activating Mujinkyaku, you will have 4 different versions of the same move with different applications. LK will just do the double kick without any follow-up, MK adds a souped up version of Karin's overhead Tsumujigari, and HK will tag on 2 slashing kicks. The EX version will add a pirouette that hits twice in front of the double kick and ending in a flying kick. As with most of Karin's specials, none of these are safe to simply throw out there, and most importantly, her MK version's overhead follow-up does not combo. So be careful when you use it as you can be interrupted all the same as is the case with her normal Tsumujigari. The LK version serves as a good combo ender and if you have the meter available even as a combo extender. Her HK version is a ground combo ender as the slashing kicks will whiff if the enemy is being juggled. The EX version can be used as a replacement in any of the described situations, but the damage output and the situation it leaves you in aren't really that much more beneficial to Karin. so in most cases I tend to save the meter unless I'm absolutely certain that the AX version's increased damage output will close out the round. Those are Karin's specials, and the one thing to take away from here is, other than her Orochi, all other specials she has leave her wide open, both whiffed and on block. For your neutral game, participating in the Footsie Olympics, you really need to rely on your normals. Kanzuki Ryu Guren no Kata is Karin's V-trigger activation, which I'll just be referring to as Gorenken going forward. Gorenken does not grant her a damage boost or better frame advantage on all of her moves. Instead, she reacquires her Street Fighter 03 move, Gorenken, including all of its follow-ups. Gorenken is by far your most threatening tool, and when used correctly can drive your opponents absolutely insane. An added bonus to her V-trigger activation is that you can use it as an animation cancel on most of your normals, similar to how you would have done with an FIDC in Street Fighter 4. It's very important to keep in mind though that this only works off of normals, not specials. Gorenken is a forward dashing Rekka style attack that hits twice. It goes straight through projectiles, cancelling them out, and even allows for a selection of follow-ups. Goren Hosho adds the animation of Meioken. It naturally combos into Gorenken and comes with the added side effect of catching people pressing buttons on block. Goren Senha adds a souped up version of Karin's Resenha, which has much higher frame advantage and can be comboed off of. Goren Senha does not combo from Gorenken though, which means that you'll have to use it as a mix-up. Goren Shochu is an elbow attack which does not combo into Gorenken. It might look useless at first, but when you're pressuring your enemy, you get another 3 options out of this move. The first option is Goren Hochu, which will cross up your opponent on the ground. It looks amazing at first, but if your opponent has seen this once, they're likely going to block it, and that's what you want them to do because of the other options Goren Shochu allows for. Goren Reshu, as opposed to Karin Senha Reshu, is in fact a really good tool. With Gorenken, you're given tools to force the opponent to think about blocking while standing up, which a blocked Resenha wouldn't. The likelihood of landing a Goren Reshu is infinitely higher than a Senha Reshu, but if your opponent doesn't get hit by it, you're just as much of a sitting duck as you would have been with a Senha Reshu. Goren Kusabi combos into both Gorenken and Goren Chochu. It's a good move to use when your opponent is expecting you to go for Goren Hochu or Reshu. Goren Kyoho is your get out of jail free card, but it's not as free as it first seems. You're susceptible to far-reaching EX moves and even supers which can catch you while you're still in your retreating animation. Goren Kyoho is the best option out of everything Karin has though, as it puts a lot of pressure on the opponent and makes them think twice about randomly tossing out an unsafe move that is supposed to interrupt you. It basically keeps them honest and allows Karin to continue her offense. Yasha Gaeshi is not actually part of her V-trigger activation, in fact it will hinder you from activating Gorenken. While that sucks, do not underestimate the usefulness of V-reversals. When characters are starting to press buttons right in your face, Karin doesn't have too many options to get out of it. Your best bet would be an EX Resenha, which isn't a good idea because if it's blocked or if you whiff, you will be in a much worse situation than while you were still blocking. Staying alive is much more important than activating Gorenken. So do not save your V-trigger for an activation if you're getting pressured. Your top priority should be to get the enemy off of you. Now that you know all of Karin's moves, there's still the issue of actually hitting your opponent. Opening up your opponent is vital, which is why I want to go through this before we dig into our bread and butter combos. No combo in the world is going to help you if all of your attacks are getting blocked, right? Which brings us back to the aforementioned standing LK and crouching LP attacks. Both attacks are really fast and put in a lot of work when you're close up. These are your can openers, and we're using them to fish for counters. In my opinion, standing LK is the superior move, but it really depends on how you play, so you really can use them interchangeably with a few exceptions. The frame advantage on your standing LK on block will even allow you to stuff most non-EX moves if you string your crouching MP correctly. If you have your crouching MP blocked as well, you're now forced to make a decision. You will either block or continue your offense. This is dependent on the actions of your opponent. If you have a very defensive opponent who is crouch blocking a lot, you might want to follow this up with a standing MK, followed by a Tsumujigari. Or you could go for a crouching MK into an Orochi, which brings you right back into the perfect position of hitting standing MK. Experiment with this to find your own style, and keep in mind that Karin is a pressure character, and you always want to be in standing MK range to be a threat. If your opponent has EX meter available, you want to be a bit more cautious and go for blocking after a blocked crouching MP and be less frequent with your standing MK. Your crouching MK into Orochi is a better option here, as Orochi will leave you safe on block, but it's not uncommon to have your crouching MK get stuffed, so be mindful of what your opponent is doing. The combos I'm outlining here are what I deem most useful. I'm sure the scaling can be optimized in a lot of ways, but this is what I'm using at least. Feel free to modify this to your heart's content. This is Karin's most basic combo and should only be used as an interrupt. Given the speed at which you need to accurately cancel Mujinkyaku from the second LP, as well as how deceptively hard it is to combo LP into LP without mashing, I don't rely on this combo that much and use it very rarely. If you're proficient in interrupting your opponent's pressure up close with an LP standing or crouching, this would convert into guaranteed damage though. Crouching MP is Karin's most essential combo starter, which links into both standing MP and crouching MK. If your combo is starting in close proximity to your opponent, standing MP is the better choice, as it will give you more choices to continue your combo and also does more damage. From a standing MP you can combo into all versions of Mujinkyaku, Tenko, Orochi and even the light version of Resenha. Crouching MK on the other hand only really allows for Mujinkyaku and Tenko to be comboed into. As the majority of your damage requires you to juggle off a Tenko anyway, it really is just a matter of spacing. If you're close, you want a standing MP, and if you're a bit further away, you want to choose crouching MK. Here are a few variations. This is pretty much all there is to Karin's combo game. Most of the game is played with footsies and trying to close the distance to her opponent. Once you're in range, you will either look for whiff or block punishes, or fish for counters with standing LK and or crouching LP, which link into crouching MP to start your combos. You will keep repeating this process until your opponent finds a way out, at which point it's back to square one, to find your way in and fish for either counters or punishes. This one I was told through a comment on one of my videos on my other channel by a user named Kevin Kwok. The second one I actually saw in a replay and I had to implement it into my own game. Unfortunately, I'm not 100% sure which player I stole this from. While it wasn't Margot, it was one of the top 5 Karins on the leaderboard, so my apologies for not giving a proper shout out here. To be clear, the mix-up isn't just a dash under the opponent, the dashing animation is what starts the mix-up. Delaying the dash will leave you in front of them, for example, which you might want to do after they've seen it once already, or do it just as early and do a neutral jump, or do a grab, if they've seen that one already. A mix-up is a mix-up because you're supposed to be mixing it up. This is not something you can be taught, you'll just have to experiment and get a feel for it. Even what I said in just these last sentences shouldn't be taken as gospel, because if you're doing the same thing over and over, it will no longer be a mix-up, now it would just be a recognizable pattern. As I mentioned in the beginning, I'm neither a pro nor an expert, this is just what I've come up with playing her the past 2 weeks. Some of this might be absolutely wrong in higher level play, or will be outdated with new tech that is going to be discovered in the coming weeks. This should give you a head start with Karin though and allow you to mold your own game from here on out. Lastly, do yourself a favor, accept losses and learn from them. Don't rage quit, don't give up, and keep practicing both your execution and reaction timing. Street Fighter is a very visual game. If you can make your hands respond to the information your eyes have taken in, you'll have people rage quit on you in no time. Plus, once Capcom has fixed the rage quitting issue, it will once again be enjoyable to have someone rage quit on you. Thanks for watching and hopefully see you around in a heated battle over that last sliver of life.